Good evening. Hello, 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 hello. Okay, I'm supposed to talk about midnight psalmody, or the psalmody in general and the development of the psalmody over the centuries. So I'll try. So before we start,
opportunity Albair معانا, and we know Albair يعني he published other than he did. I came to the book study and Abuna Maximus and as long as you're talking about history and development. And he published many books and they're all about the rights and the hymnology. So all the books are inside of his mind. No question. This is your chance and
this is why I'm cheating. What's that?
Have you thought of creating an audio copy for all these books that you've
They are working on it. I suggested it to the publisher, and they're working on it.
Okay, let us know when you have audio books so we can listen to it.
Okay, sounds good. I'm sure it's a lot of people will benefit from this as well, because no one reads anymore. Okay, so before we start on the development of midnight psalmody, maybe we can talk a little bit about background about the ancient state of the church in the first maybe 4 centuries, because this will help us understand how things developed. In the first 3 centuries, Christianity was treated as a cult. The Roman Empire viewed Christians as rebels that need to be controlled and sometimes imprisoned or even killed. As such, gatherings were not permitted. They were considered illegal. Yeah, so Christians used to meet in small numbers at houses. There was no churches at the time, so just at houses in the evening to pray the Eucharist. They viewed themselves as sojourners in this world, as they believed that they belong to the heavenly kingdom. So this is in the first 3 centuries. In the 4th century, specifically in the year 313, Emperors Constantine and Licinius met in Milan and issued the Edict of Milan. Not sure if you heard about it, but it's very, very famous, and it was a turning point in Christianity.
Is that when the Roman Empire became Christian?
He did not become Christian at the time, but Christianity became legal, became one of the empire religions, and a preferred one as well. So with that, this allowed public worship, which comes with building cathedrals, development of ceremonial services, gathering in large numbers, elaboration of chants, elongation of public worships, etc. This type of ritual development, which emerged in the cities, is called cathedral rite. Okay? Cathedral rite. This is important. After the Edict of Milan and the reconciliation of the church with the world, the church started to view and present herself not as a group of sojourners anymore, but rather as the salt of the earth.
They still also thought that they were sojourners, even though they were the salt of the earth?
Not at the time, but we'll see when this happened after, because it kept going back and forth. In the same century, we're talking about the 4th century here, another significant change emerged. This time comes from Egypt. I'm sure you guessed, the monastic movement. sometimes referred to as desert monasticism. Although this movement was initiated by lay people, it was quickly acknowledged by the church. This may have been because Christians in the region, especially in the East, rejected the idea of the reconciliation of the church with the world. They believed that retreating to the desert was a way to refocus on spiritual growth and deepen their union with Jesus. In doing so, monks used praying at all times as means to reach this goal. More prayers, especially at night, were developed to achieve this purpose. The services provided in this system were simple and mostly based on recitation, not chanting. This is what we refer to as the monastic rite. So we now have cathedral rite and monastic rite. Cathedral rite emerged in the cities, and monastic rite emerged in monasteries, both in the 4th century. In the same century as well, we're talking about which century here? 4th. Another type of rites emerged from urban monasticism. Urban monasticism consists of male and female ascetics who lived near the cathedrals of their home cities. Urban monasticism served as a bridge between cathedral and monastic rites. Between the 4th and 8th centuries, the church put a lot of effort in unifying practices between city churches and monasteries. Okay, so this is just a little background about the state of the church in the first 4 centuries and the difference between cathedral rite, monastic rite, and the bridge between both, urban monasticism. So now let's zoom in on visual service or the psalmody. In Arabic, it's called tasbiha.
مش سستيند انك انت تفضل على ركب
لا لا لا
تجيبهولي
انا
وباراشوت.
لا لا لا
انا
لا
عارف انك رياضي
انا
وكل حاجه
جامد
بس
يعني لا لا it's okay, thank you Abun. From its name, psalmody was in its primitive form the recitation or uttering of psalms. As mentioned before, it emerged with the monasticism in the 4th century. In the parable of the 10 virgins, the Lord says, "Therefore keep watch, because you do not know the day or the hour." This is in Matthew 25, verse 13. Also, St. Paul says, "Therefore let us not sleep as others do, but let us watch and be sober. For those who sleep, sleep at night, and those who get drunk are drunk at night. But let us who are of the day be sober, putting on the breastplate of faith and love, and as a helmet the hope of salvation." This is in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verses 6 to 8. So monks literally strived to stay all night sober, awaiting the bridegroom. In doing so, they uttered the book of Psalms. And I must note here that the recitation of the book of Psalms is originally a Jewish tradition that we inherited from them through the apostles. This does not mean that Psalms were chanted at that time. In fact, in desert monasticism, chanting psalms was discouraged. It was either recited or hummed. Nevertheless, in urban monasticism, remember, urban monasticism is the monasteries or the monastic communities at the edge of the cities. So in urban monasticism, chanting psalms was an acceptable practice. Chanting hymns and psalms was originally a cathedral rite, meaning developed in city churches. So in other words, midnight psalmody as we know it today, in terms of chanting hymns and psalms, came from city churches, not monasteries. As such, it was normal that urban monasticism would be influenced first, then desert monasticism. The transition from psalms as readings to psalms as chants started in the mid-5th century and was accomplished by the end of the 6th century. Although the visual service started in monasteries, it was welcomed in the city churches soon after. In monasteries, it was an autonomous office that is employed daily, regardless of whether the Eucharist is prayed or celebrated in the following day or not. However, in city churches, it was only limited to preceding liturgies. The main driver for unifying the monastic and cathedral traditions was the emergence of heresies. The church at the time sought better control over texts and practices to prevent deviations from orthodoxy. The book containing psalmody office is called Psalter, in Arabic Psalmodiyya. The first known Psalter was compiled by Bishop Nepos of Al-Fayyum in the 3rd century, very, very early.
What was so special about this bishop?
He was the first to compile those chants that were prayed during visual service in a book. So the first Psalter was developed or written or compiled by this bishop. Of course, it would be very simple and primitive format, but at least this is the first compiled book. So let's get to the meat of the talk today. Per the contemporary practice, the Coptic Church observes, let's see, do we have deacons here? How many psalmodies do we have?
Lots.
No. Types, different types.
Oh, we have the hosts, the different hosts. Where we say exalted above forever. We sing in the chorus, His mercy endures forever. And we sing the song about Pharaoh and his horse going into the Red Sea, the psalmody of Moses.
Okay, so those are called canticles. The entire service is called psalmody. So we have two types of psalmodies, Vespers psalmody and midnight psalmody. So by the way, just to, maybe it's the terms or the terminologies, psalmody means the actual service, not the book, not how we commonly say it. The book is Psalter. The service is psalmody. So psalmody is in Arabic tasbiha. Psalter is psalmodiyya, just to be on the same page. So we have two psalmodies, two types of psalmodies, Vespers and midnight. So very quickly we're gonna go over them.
Is the matin part of the midnight, or this is a different?
Yeah, currently, yeah, and we're gonna. This is part of the. Okay. So Psalm 116, Nieth Nostiro. So, this psalm is used in Matins and Vespers services in most churches in both East and West. Then we're talking about the first type, which is Vespers Psalmody, okay? So it always starts with Psalm 116, then the fourth canticle, which is basically consists of Psalms 148, 149, and 150. Sali of the day. How many salis do we have?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
7.
7 for each day, in addition to for the ones for the occasions. So we have for the feasts and fasts, and we have tons of salis, but the ones we have one for each day. And then the Theotokion is said. The Theotokion, similar to the salis, we have one for each day, so we have 7 in total. But we don't have for the occasions. The Theotokions, we have only one for 7, one for each day. Then we have a Lupsh. And Lupsh sometimes mistranslated into interpretation, but Lupsh means seal or summary. Even if you read the Lupsh, you will find that it doesn't interpret anything. It doesn't explain anything in the Theotokion. It's just like a summary to seal it, to conclude it. Okay? So Lupsh means seal, and it's attributable to the Theotokion. Then we have the antiphonary, which is biography of the saint of the day. Similar to the Synaxarion, but it's said during Tasbihah. And finally, we have the conclusion of the Theotokions. And we have one for the Adam days and one for the Watus days. Okay, so this is the first type. Now, the second type, which is the more elaborate one, is the Midnight Psalmody. Okay? And we're going to focus today on the one for Sunday. The one for Sunday, because this is the biggest one and the original one. It starts with Arise, O children of the light, Tenthino. Then the first canticle and its Lupsh. Second canticle and its Lupsh. Third canticle, then followed by Sali Aripsalin, which was composed in the 15th century by Cantor Sarkis. Cantor Sarkis, after that, became a priest. But anyway, he's very famous and liked to introduce or develop all his pieces or prayers in both Coptic and Greek. After that, only in Upper Egypt, on some areas in Upper Egypt, a hymn for the three saintly youth called Shumtin Romi, the three men, it means 3 men, is chanted after Aripsalim. Sorry?
Don't we sing it here in the midnight about the 3
We don't sing it here.
You don't?
No, it's very rare coming from, like this is a very rare hymn.
Oh, okay.
It was preserved.
I know it's like in the hymns we mentioned about the 3 youths.
Yeah, so there is another one after, which is Tinin. So this one, Shumtin Romi, was preserved by the cantors of a village in Upper Egypt called Zineya. Anyway, and after that, yeah.
A quick question, is it different when we say exalted Abba? Is this a different song?
Sorry?
There's a song that we sing in the Midnight Praises where it says exalted Abba forever, and we mention the 3 youths in that song.
Yeah, so this is the third canticle.
Okay.
And after that, after the third canticle, there is a Ripsaline, followed by Shumt al-Rumi in certain areas in Upper Egypt. This is very rare. It was mentioned in several manuscripts in Upper Egypt, but never in Lower Egypt. And then we have Tinain. And Tinain was introduced in visuals in the 15th century. But originally, it was prayed during the liturgy. Might be surprising to a lot of people. It was actually, it's found in manuscripts in the 8th and 9th centuries, and it was originally 3 separate hymns and chanted during the Eucharist, and they were put together in the 15th century and introduced into the Midnight Psalmody.
You sing that song often?
Yeah, we sing it a lot, Tinain. Then we come to Tunewin Sok, which is basically the lupsh of the third canticle. Then this is followed by commemoration of the saints, and Ibn Kabar, who is a priest, a scholar priest in the 14th century, lived towards the end of the 13th century and beginning of the 14th century, never mentioned it. So probably it was introduced in maybe the 15th century or so. Then the doxologies, and doxologies are not original, it's not an original element in the Midnight Psalmody, but belongs to the incense offering office. This is followed by the fourth canticle, Sali of the day, Theotokion of the day, Lupsh attributable to the Theotokion, antiphonary conclusion of the Theotokions. Concluding prayers consists of, we magnify you, O Mother of the True Light, the Creed, Lord have mercy, and Ifnotina none, Holy, 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 the Lord's Prayer, and the Midnight Absolution.
When do you sing the morning doxology?
After that. So after you finish everything, you say the morning doxology. So now, what do you notice from this? Like, look at this and tell me what do you notice.
They end almost the same.
Huh?
They end almost the same.
Yeah, elaborate.
Once you get to the fourth chronicle, it kind of, both of them will have fourth chronicle, then the Sully, then the Teotokon, then the Lupsh, the antiphonary, and then the conclusion.
Bravo, bravo. اسمك ايه? What's your name?
Mishleen.
Micheline, هايلة. Excellent, excellent, excellent. Look at this. So this is identical. Can you guess why? No guesses? Just give it a shot. Try.
Is it part of the bridge between the cathedral rite and the monastic rite?
No. Okay. Because this last part was a completely separate psalmody. It was called Matins Psalmody. It was separate from the Midnight Psalmody. So, and by the way, we call it, I want to differentiate between Matins and Prime. Matins, in terms of time, starts at around 3 a.m. until dawn time. But the prime hour starts at 7 a.m. So in terms of this one, it's called matins because it happens early in the morning before dawn time, or it used to. But the offering of incense that we pray before the liturgy should be called prime offering of incense because it doesn't happen at dawn time, it happens at 7 a.m. This is a side note. Some comments. First, the original placement of the concluding prayers was before the fourth canticle. So if you go back here, this used to be here.
What used to be here?
The concluding prayers at the end used to be after the doxologies or after the concluding of the midnight psalmody. But of course, when you insert the matin psalmody, the conclusion will have to go to at the end, right? So this is the first thing. Second, in the past, before electricity, people used to sleep much earlier than now, maybe around 8 o'clock or so. So they would wake up in the middle of the night to recite or chant vigils. Then they would rest a little before going back to church to pray the matin psalmody, the one in green, followed by prime offering of incense. Then they go to work or to the liturgy on Sundays. We notice that after the 14th century, many new liturgical elements were added. The hymns attributable to the third canticle, which are Aripsalin, Shumtin Romi, and Tinin, were inserted between the third canticle and its lubsh, If you notice, it was first canticle and its lubsh, second canticle and its lubsh, third canticle, and then a whole gap, and then the lubsh. So they were inserted in between. Also, the commemoration of saints and the doxologies are recited after the lubsh of the third canticle. So to summarize, look at this. This is the original format or the primitive format of the midnight psalmody. Arise, O children, followed by first canticle and its lubsh, second canticle and its lubsh, third canticle and its lubsh, and then the conclusion. It was as simple as that. And then Matin's psalmody was inserted after the third canticle, right, as one uninterrupted unit. This is the fourth canticle, the Sali, Kullu Qissadi. Okay? And then in the 15th century, or after around the 15th century, and maybe after 16 as well, we have more elements inserted before and after the lubsh. So here, interpolations after the 14th century, then the lubsh, and finally the interruptions after the 14th century. And then we go back to the Matin Psalmody. So this is the current shape of the Midnight Psalmody. And that's it for me. Any questions? Yeah.
So I don't know if you had talked about this or not, but in terms of like the tune of everything, where is that derived from? Is it like does it come from for example, we've all heard about wow, everything's like in my mind. But what I'm trying to say is there are hymns that like have a pharaonic background to them, right? And then we like take those tunes and then we like add spiritual words. Is that where they were getting all of the tunes of these hymns from? Or is it like derived from like, this sounds musically nice, I'll just sing this like this?
Okay, good question. I'm just trying to give you some When you listen to pop music or jazz,
Right.
you can identify that this is jazz even without knowing the actual song.
Yes.
If you listen to a Spanish music, you recognize that this is Spanish music even if it's your first time to listen to the music, right?
Yeah.
To this song, specific song. So many of our hymns were taken from the same pharaonic or ancient Egyptian music that way, not necessarily copy and paste. This is one thing. This is like the very general concept. Now we get into more details. Even during the ancient Egyptian era, they used blind cantors to transmit the hymns. They didn't use musical notations. And that caused problems. From generation to the next, hymns were started to change bit by bit.
Yeah.
So the ones that we have now, not necessarily what they had long ago. Now we add another layer. If you look at manuscripts, you're going to find that many of the hymns there don't exist anymore now. And some hymns were like, we don't even use the lyrics, never mind the music. We don't use them at all. We add another layer. Many of the hymns were composed late in the game. Some were in the 15th century, 16th century, 18th century. Some hymns, like Tenin, for example, if you study its music, you will find that it's taken, or a lot of it, المقامات بتاعته, are coming from Persian, Turkish, and Arabic music. So that could be because of the influence. The hymn might be old and had an original melody that no longer, because of the influence, it started to change because the ear changed.
Yeah.
So eventually, bit by bit, they started to add ornamentation to the music, the melodies, so they change a little. So going back to your question, the general idea, it's not like copy and paste. So the person who said that, it was about specific hymns, Dr. Raghib Muftah. He said that about Golgotha and Pekthronos and Iporo,
Yeah.
not the Midnight Psalmody. And when he said that, it was, at least to me, not really solid evidence, not based on solid evidence. So what he did, he took the choir of the High Institute of the Coptic Hymns, took them to one of the temples, the ancient Egyptian temples, and asked them to chant Golgotha in there. So it sounded to him much nicer than in the church. So he deduced that this must have been designed for that environment, not came after. So this is how he got his theory. Like after maybe 50 years from when he wrote this article, I don't know if this is even a good evidence anymore to base it on, like, and now we are trying to generalize it to all the Coptic music are copy and paste from Pharaonic music.
Yeah.
But again, if you go to Persia, you recognize their music. You go to the West, you know that this is jazz, this is pop, this is rap. There are genres, right? So this is the same thing. It's ancient Egyptian, and the musicians start to develop, and we know that some popes developed music in the church. We know that cantors did a lot of them. We know that some bishops and priests developed music. So, and some we imported from Byzantine church. So, what I'm saying, it's not like one, like we can't treat the entire collection of Coptic hymns same way, one way.
So like it all originated from Egypt, but not necessarily all Quranic.
Yeah.
And then later on down the line, as the cultures mix and people visit and people get invaded, you can also hear like a mix of other surrounding nations.
Yeah, and it's involuntarily, like like when the Arabs invaded Egypt and the states from the 7th century until now, automatically this is what you hear. So when you start to write music, automatically you're influenced by this type of music. You will write the same way.
Do we have any, or do you know of which of these are the least influenced? Is there any evidence to show which ones are oldest? Or
Golgotha is one, because if they don't have the quarter tone or the three, the ancient Egyptian music was like the Western music, half or one tone, which is the case in Golgotha. But many hymns you will see the quarter tone. This would be influenced by Arabic or Turkish music.
The more basic it is, the less it's been influenced.
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting.
Well, I just one question. Like, if somebody tomorrow were to say, like, because like these are all prayers, and then you add a cultural tune to it that does not, overtly induce the emotions. That way, the mind is still focused on prayer, and then essentially you have a hymn. So technically speaking, anybody could create a hymn. That doesn't mean that the church should completely adopt it in its services, but essentially that is what's going on. Is that correct? Or was there did the Holy Synod come together and observe it and decide on what's going on?
No, most of the hymns were copied. Like a cantor would develop a hymn and say it in his church, and especially if they are influential, like in the cathedral or something, other cantors, especially in the same region, would copy that cantor. Okay. And then it spreads. The idea of unifying hymns and rites, this came very late in the game.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It was until very recent.
What century?
No, we're talking about last century.
Really?
Yeah, before that, it was, you have Alexandrian music and way of doing things, to the extent that Pope Shenouda was so bothered with it, and he sent cantors to change it. Upper Egypt, we have recordings of how they say things, so until the recording time, they were different. And they are different, each region is different. Not all Upper Egypt the same thing. Each region is different. So it was, and not only the music, even the rite. So for example, the procession during the Feast of the Cross and Palm Sunday, we currently, what we do is like 12 stations. Each station we read a gospel and response and move to the next station. This was not the case. Wow. A few years back. You will see, for example, in the Muharra Monastery, they go to the Tafus and they go to مش عارف ايه. It's like over 20 of them stations. Same thing with each monastery, they will have their own procession. In a lot of manuscripts, you will see that they say according to the rite of Al-Mu'allaqa and according to the rite of Harid Zuwaila. Golgotha that we say today is actually 3 concluding canons put together. Originally, each one was said in a different region, but when they decided to unite, they put everything together and said, okay, let's all say everything. So, yeah, it was different for a very long time. It was very specific to the region and sometimes to the church.
Right. Well,
So
sorry, yeah.
is that because it's different in different regions? Does that mean whoever the bishop was overseeing that region was the one saying like, yes, this is what we should
Not
do?
bishop.
Or-
Bishop didn't have much say in this, and I don't think they cared.
So-
Yeah, the cantors.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, but it's tradition. It's written. So they write manuscripts. But remember that in the past, there was no internet. There was no. The communication was very difficult. So each area is like kind of isolated. So they keep saying the same thing with very minimal communication to other regions. So they take from each other the surrounding churches sometimes and sometimes not. But this is why you would see Alexandria, for example, the melodies, even the liturgy was completely different. Same thing in Upper Egypt, like the farther you go, you will find that the melodies and rites are really different because of the communication.
But I think even today, like when I go to New Jersey and I attend liturgy there, some of the melodies are slightly different than like they're saying all the same stuff we say here, but the melody's different. And I'm like, wait,
Yeah.
who's right, who's wrong?
Yeah.
We hear about monasteries. Sorry. I talked a lot.
No,
Please
go ahead.
We hear about like different monasteries. I think, if I'm not mistaken, specifically David Boramos, where you go there and not only are the hymns, from what I've heard, quite different. The key word there is quite. But also the monks are very stern on ensuring that it's their way. So when you have a monastery that is that ancient and clearly seems to have been holding on to very specific traditions, is it, in your opinion, safe to say that if anybody has the correct, most original tune correctly, it might be one of those ancient monasteries?
No.
No, okay.
No. So, for example, Deir Abu Ma'ar, St. Macarius. This is one of the most ancient monasteries, and half of the patriarchs came from out of this monastery. And it was known to be the second, replaced the School of Alexandria after it was no longer a thing. So anyway, it was very solid monastery. Yet the hymns that are handed down in there now were all handed down by a monk called Kyrillos, Abuna Kyrillos. He passed now, but he lived in the last century, and this is his way, not even a cantor. So we cannot assume it's just going to be one influential monk who knows his stuff and would teach the monks, and this would be the way they do things. Not necessarily it came all the way from the time this monastery was established. Al-Muharra is the same thing. It started with some cantors and monks, and then Cantor Tawfiq came, learned from them, but learned also from other sources and Ma'alim Mikhaiel and others. And then the monastery until now, it's Cantor Tawfiq, it's done. He was so influential that he changed everything to his way and they followed suit. And again, this was last century and he died, I think, beginning of this century.
Do you feel like there's any dangers in not being true to the original tune of the hymn?
So what is the original? So the only original that we know, of course I'm biased, is Cantor Mikhaiel the Great, because he is the first one to record hymns. We don't have any recording before that. And he's the only one the musical notation was taken from. Like his way was the only documentation, whether that be in voice or notation. So, and that was, he passed in 1964.
When did he live? When did his birth? When was his birth?
Around 1890 something, or even a little bit before that, but he lived very long, 76 years, you do the math. So, he started the project with Dr. Raghib Muftah. This was in 1927 when they started to write down the musical notations. So anyway, it's not that far ago. We're talking about 70 years, 70, 80 years. But before that, we don't know anything. Like, he took hymns from 7 cantors older than him, but we don't have any recordings of them. So we don't know what he changed, what he did not. We don't have nothing. This is the first source that we have for Coptic hymns in terms of recordings.
Have you heard any of the originals? Like, I'm assuming they're on like vinyls or something.
Yeah, real. Yeah, of course. I have the entire collection. He recorded 24 of them. Any other question?
Is there any cantors that, like, is there still more cantors? Is that something that, like, people still do? And if there are, how many are there?
Cantors?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Each church has a cantor in Egypt.
Oh, yeah?
Almost. Yeah. Very few churches that eliminated this, but the majority have it.
Do they still make their own hymns?
No. So the church now is leaning more towards unifying than the preserving the wealth or the heritage. So they don't care that much about all the different kinds, and this is a way of Asyut, or this is Luxor, or this is. They care more about the unity of the church, especially with this church spreading all over the world. It's going to become a much more difficult task to unify them if everyone comes up with their own thing.
So this final version that you had posted, who was responsible for saying this is what we're going to use as the standard?
Okay, so the main elements, you will find them, this was long ago. We're talking about possibly 15th century, 15th, 16th century. Maybe if Nuti Nainan was introduced, اللي بنقولها في الآخر ده دون Amin Kyrie eleison. This one was just introduced to Midnight Samudi in the 20th century, last century. Before that, it was not there. So that maybe was the last element added to the core. Now, if you're talking about melodies, madayh, or salis, they kept like writing, cantors kept writing new ones with no new tunes, just lyrics, and most of them are very weak in the 17th, 18th, up even 19th century. And many cases, you will find the name of the cantor in the sali itself. Either each stanza starts with a letter from his name, so you can compose, deduce the name, or they plainly mention the name at the end. زي
Don't
سركيس.
forget your servant Sarkis.
سركيس. كان لازم يحط الختم. Copyrighted Sarkis. Yeah.
So there must be some committee that says now, like currently, that we're unifying and we're creating a standard. Is there a committee that
There is.
decided what's in the standard and what's not in the standard?
So
How does that?
standard is now, it's in all the Psalmodies, since what made it standard is the first printed Psalmody.
Okay.
Once you have a publisher, and you start printing in huge numbers, this becomes the standard. So most of standard books, what we consider standard now, came after the first release of whatever. That could be a Holy Week book, Eucharist, the liturgies, Psalmody, Psalter, Agbeya, anything. But if you go backwards to manuscripts, you will find a lot of variation. It started with the printing. But yes, back to your point, there is a committee now given the responsibility of hymns and rites and trying to unify them. Whether this task is accomplished or not, or is going to be accomplished, this is a different topic. But ازيك يا ابونا؟ ازيك يا ابونا؟
لسه جايبين في سيرتك. بكلمك في جايبين لسه جايبين في سيرتك.
ماشي اوكي. Any other question? Well, I know I bored you so much. I know this topic is very heavy. So
Very nice. The history and the development and definitely yes, like having a standard, maybe unification. We reach it or not is a difference.
Yeah.
But maybe also another point is that we do not let this impact us spiritually benefiting from this. So sometimes when people who get kind of stuck, this is the right one, this is the right way, doesn't really matter because there has been development, even in the liturgy itself, but how to really focus on the meat.
Yes,
inside
yeah, definitely. We have to think of right as growing, and like a living being, and because at the end of the day, it's put to serve the people, not the other way around. So with the changes in our lives, also rituals should adapt to that. Otherwise, it's going to become a very rigid thing. So it's not bad to change, but change should be based on understanding how things developed so they can make the right move. How to change, what to change, what's the core, what are the peripherals that we can change, get rid of, or add or change. But and what is the core so we can keep the main Orthodox Coptic identity intact.
Any tips for us to have what to do, like on an individual basis or corporate basis?
To do what?
For your last comment, like to intact the Coptic identity while benefiting spiritually from chanting, from using them in our prayers.
Like what I found.
So for you who knows the history on the personal level, your spiritual thing, what do you keep in mind to keep you, you know what, with the development, with the variation, with everything, what you keep in mind to benefit spiritually on the personal level?
Honestly, for me at least, I put all of this aside when we are in the tasbiha or udas. I put all of this aside and focus on the core. The lyrics is for us to unite with Jesus. The melodies help us to unite with Jesus. So this is the focus. This is the goal, the ultimate goal at the end. So if you know all the history and all the how things works and what is right and what's wrong, what is the point of that if at the end of the day you're gonna go out of it with no benefit? So at least for me, I try to put this aside and focus on the prayers. And I always tell the deacons, if you are at any church, try to pray like them. Don't go to them and tell them, oh, by the way, you do it wrong. Or this is not the right way. Don't worry about that when you are at a church, unless they ask you. Just pray, focus on the prayer. And if you are staying with them, then do what they do. And yeah, don't be a troublemaker. But
This is a very valuable advice. Like to know doesn't mean that you go and change everything, but to
Yeah.
know and at the same time focus on the core.
Yeah.
This is a very valuable advice.
although sometimes it's difficult, I can't deny it's difficult, but I think we have to fight it.
What is the reference behind, like, when they came up with all these hymns? You said the reference was songs and all these things, but there's also like a lot of deep explanation on Holy Trinity, things that are not even mentioned in the Bible, like Salome being with Saint Mary and Saint Joseph. How did they come up with all these things? What was the reference?
So it depends on the hymn. So for example, the Theotokos, a lot of it came from sermons by Saint Severus of Antioch. Monday Theotokion, pieces of it came from Saint Cyril's sermons. So they take the father's sermons and they start to use the same phrases, some of it same exact phrase like in the sermon, and put it in the as stanzas in the Theotokion. So to keep especially that these patriarchs fought to preserve orthodoxy. So it's not just spiritual but also theological lessons inside so this is why they didn't alter the chain or alter the phrases, their phrases much. So they took them more or less as is and put them in stanzas in the Theotokions. Some hymns were developed like in Kiyak by patriarchs like Ambamorus, for example. Some of them by cantors and bishops. So it depends. It really depends on which hymn, and many of the hymns we don't know, because it was a Coptic tradition that part of being humble, not to write your name or document that you actually put this together. Another one I remember now, Epikran, for example, for the saints. It was originally for Saint Bersuma, and it was written by someone called Albair, who was a priest at the time and then became a bishop. So bishops, priests, patriarchs, sometimes like in the Theotokens, from sermons. This is, of course, in addition to the scripture.
Actually, it's nice when we are chanting the psalmody, the different components is, for example, the Theotokens, I think they have lots of explanation about St. Mary and the symbolism that we use.
Yes.
So it's beside the chanting and the nice tune, it has some teaching points.
Yes.
And the rest of them as well.
Yes.
So
Yes. In fact, Theotokens is one of the references in Orthodoxy for us. Like if they want to compare an idea, if this is right or wrong, they go back to Theotokens, not the Salis, but the Theotokens. This is a reference to us. Okay.
Thank you, Albair.
Sorry, you're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.